Morning, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School. And what I wanted to do this morning is I want to kind of revisit a video from 2 years ago called the 5-tool rule. And the 5-tool rule concept is a very solid concept for understanding the types of tools, not necessarily a specific tool, but the types of tools that one should carry in a woodland environment for situations other than emergency survival. In other words, you plan to be there. And the question really becomes, do you plan to be there short term and enjoy yourself for a little while camping while you're hiking and hunting or fishing and things like that? Or are you planning to be there a little bit longer term, like a hunting camp that may last a week or more? Or do you have conveyance and you plan on staying for a month or a season? And all of those things will dictate the exact tools that you'll take. But this 5-tool rule goes across the board in almost any scenario. And I want to explain to you a little bit before we get into this and talk about the different tools and different scenarios. I'd like to discuss this 5-tool rule. And one of the things that I didn't talk about too much in the first video that I think will help you digest and understand the concept a little bit better. And when you're talking about manipulating natural material, especially wood material and plant material, there are really 5 tasks that you have to perform in order to make usable objects from those materials. Number one, you have to be able to cross-cut the wood across the grain. You need to be able to split the wood along the grain. You need to be able to shape the wood, depending on what you're making. You're going to need to be able to hollow or make concavities in the wood. And then you're going to be able to need to bore holes in the wooden material. And if you're using plant material, some of these things still apply, although plant materials are so much more pliable. You're really talking more about cordages and things like that from plant material, or shingling, temporary shingling and things like that, bundling, making brooms, those types of things that a knife will pretty much do anything you need it to do. But when you're talking about actual wood material, you're going to need to be able to do those 5 things to manipulate those woods and barks and things of that nature to get usable objects made from the landscape. And carrying those tools is important because they're hard to recreate from the landscape. They take specialized materials, or they take a specialized skill level, just like the 5 C's that we talk about in an emergency kit. Those 5 items are the hardest to recreate from natural material, and they take the longest amount of time to recreate, and sometimes they take a specialized skill level to recreate those materials to make them long-term usable objects. So with this stuff, what we're talking about is 5 tools that will do those 5 tasks in good passable fashion. So let's talk about them one at a time in a larger kit, and this would be a kit more like if you had conveyance, and this is a base for building your kit. These are the 5 minimums, and you would build your kit from that depending on how long you were planning on staying and what you were planning on doing. So if you've got to split the wood, or if you're trying to cut the wood across the grain, you can do both of those tasks with an axe, especially a large felling axe like this. But when you're talking about cross-cutting the wood across the grain, this is going to sever the grain at an angle if you're trying to fell a tree, but it's much better for splitting the wood with the grain to create firewood materials, to create plank materials, to create things that you need to use for making furnitures and all of those type things. If you really want something that will effectively cross-cut the grain and manipulate that wood to make manageable sizes or planks of lumber and things of that nature, you really want a saw for that. And a large frame buck saw like this one is going to be the best for that task if you're trying to tackle larger materials. And again, the size of these things is dictated by the scenario that you plan to be in or that you plan to operate in. When you're talking about shaping the material, just a large belt knife like this Leicu or anything with a 5 to 6 inch blade on it is going to be good for that, and it will enable you to be able to do carving work to a certain extent to be able to shape that wood. The next thing you want to do is you want to be able to hollow that wood, and we can always hollow wood or make concavities in wood by fire, and we can drill holes in wood by friction. But all of those things take lots of energy. They expend a lot of resources with the fire that you're using to recreate that resource or to create that resource. So that's not the optimum way to do things. That's the more primitive way to do things. The faster way, the more exacting way, is to use things like a large gouge that you can hold in both hands to create a concavity in the wood, to manipulate that material for making anything from a small spoon bowl to a large dough trough. And then as far as boring the wood, what you're going to want is something that's large enough. If you're talking about a large scale kit like this, we're talking about something that's big enough we can drive pins in to hold it together, or put legs in a stool or legs in a table and things like that. So now we want something around a 2-inch auger, and this T-handle auger, Scotch-eyed auger, if you choose to call it that you can just shove a branch through there and use that as a T-handle that cuts large diameter holes, will give you the ability to make things like furnishings. And that's important on a larger scale, and you could even use that for pinning cabin components together and things like that. So a large scale kit like this would be for larger scale projects. For bushcrafting, just a couple days in the woods and things like that, the tools would reduce in not only size, but they would reduce in weight as well. But it's also going to reduce the ability to process larger materials. So you have to cater this kit to your planned outing. Okay, so as we reduce the size of our kit, or reduce our length of stay, or we don't have conveyance and now we have to start carrying this gear on our back, we can start to reduce the size of these tools, understanding it's going to reduce the magnitude of projects that we can complete within reason. So now we may go down to maybe the same belt knife of like a 5 or 6 inch design, or maybe even the knife that we're wearing on our hip that's only 4.5 inches or something like that. It's a Scandinavian design and Scandinavian grind, so that we can do fine carving work and manipulate wood easily with that knife. And then instead of that large gouge, we may go to a smaller swept type gouge or a hook type gouge that we can use either 1 or 1.5 handed to manipulate wood, but it takes up much less room in our pack, and it still has a nice wide blade on it to do lots of work, again, from making spoons to making bowls if necessary. Now our auger bit, we may go down to something like a 3/4 inch auger bit with just a handmade adapter for it that will give us that ability to drill holes for lashing things together if we want to, or also lashing or pinning furniture together. And we can easily make pins from green wood that will work with this temporarily if we have this auger bit with us. And we may choose to carry a couple different sizes of auger bits. All of that's up to you, but you're going to want something that you can still bore holes with at this point. And then something like a 24-inch axe like this Woodcraft axe from Council Tool, which is one of my favorite carry axes. And then your saw may go down to something like a folding buck saw design made of wood, or a folding one made of metal like the Boreal 21 or something like that. That will work well. And you can carry a lot of these tools in combination together, where you can put the axe and the saw in one sleeve. You can put these together in one area and then have your belt knife on your belt, and you've got all 5 of those tools in a much more compact and much smaller package than you would have carrying the larger stuff. But again, you're dictated by the magnitude of project you can make by the tools that you carry. But you can get an awful lot of stuff done even with a kit this size. You can make all the furniture, spoons, bowls, and camp craft items that you want to make life more comfortable around camp, or just to practice your skills in general. But these tools will make anything that you need to make, for the most part, on a medium scale. Okay, so let's reduce that kit down just a little bit more. So now for our axe, we may have something small like this Helco Rhineland hatchet made in Germany. I think this is a very underrated little carving hatchet, but it will do a lot for busting up kindling and making firewood. Down to a 4.5 inch knife. I've got an axe, it's not going to be a problem, and this will do some fine carving work for shaping my wood. A folding saw, now I've gone to just a straight folding saw like a Baco Laplander or an Open L folding saw, something like that. A smaller hook knife that I can use for making concavities in wood, and then a handheld awl that I can use for drilling holes in barks and wood and things like that. So now I've reduced my 5 tools in size, but they all do the same 5 functions that I needed to begin with to be able to manipulate wood and bark and plant material. But I've got a much more condensed kit that's much easier to carry in like a day pack or something like that. Okay, let's go down to one final reduction just to show you how really you can make this a micro kit that will still accomplish those same tasks, again, at a different level. We can keep this small hatchet in our kit, or we could forgo the hatchet, understanding that we can split the wood with our belt knife if we baton it properly and we select our wood properly. If we have an SAK, there's a saw on there. There is an awl on there. And again, there's a finer or smaller cutting blade on there as well. So that gives us the ability to be able to bore the wood, to be able to split the wood. We have a saw where we can cross cut the wood. We can carve the wood and shape the wood. And all that leaves is making concavities in the wood. And if we carry this small pocket carving jack, it has several blades on it that are made for exactly that. This is a small pocket carving tool that's made for doing whittling work, that has lots of blades on it that create concavities in wood. And there's about 5 or 6 different blades on this tool. And then you really have a small pocket kit. And so now we can really reduce the weight and volume of our kit, still accomplish all 5 of the major tasks that we need to accommodate manipulating wood, or to accomplish manipulating wood, but we can do it in smaller scale with these tools. And again, we can either keep the hatchet in there so that we know we have the right tool for the right job, or if we're just trying to make spoons or something like that, we need to cut down small spoon blanks, we may choose to baton our knife, as long as we do it properly so that we don't take a chance on damaging that knife, and we make sure we have the right knife for that job. So again, I wanted to revisit the 5-tool rule, really so that you understood why those 5 different tools are important, and really the 5 functions that you need to understand to manipulate wood materials. Because if you have tools that will perform those 5 functions, they can be as small as a couple of pocket tools, or as large as something that you may need conveyance to carry, depending on the magnitude, again, of the projects you plan to accomplish. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. I appreciate you joining me today for this quick video review or revisit of the 5-tool rule and the 5 functions to manipulate wood. I appreciate everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.